That was a little improvised introduction to Chiral. Good to see so many joining. Thank you for being here. So we wanted to do a little stream showing off the new device from us, and I'm going to, let's see, let's take away this rolling thing. So I'm just going to go through the features, the ideas, and some thoughts behind the synth. and then show a little bit about how things work behind the scenes for those who are interested in DSP and Max and just general little bit deeper synthesis knowledge. We're gonna explain what phase shaping is and look at how it's done. And at any point in time, just ask questions or whatever, and let's just have a fun time exploring this synth. Let me know how the audio levels are, because it's always hard to tell with these streaming softwares. It looks good from my end, but let me know if anything is low or unbalanced or whatever, and I'll try and do my best to keep up. Okay, great. So, what we're looking at right now is how it looks when you load the Chiral package. This is what you get when you purchase the device. This time we packaged it as an Ableton pack, and it kind of just extracts to anywhere on your hard disk, and you get this Ableton Live project with a bunch of presets in the device, and this pretty nifty built-in manual, which kind of goes over the basics of the synth, some ideas. You can read about how the oscillator works, what the parameters do, kind of stuff like that, in pretty good detail. And this is, of course, also available as like a PDF and stuff. Yeah. But, right now we're not going to look at that too much because I'm here. So hopefully I will be sufficient in explaining how the synth works, I would hope. Basically, Chiral is a synth that came from a long time of exploring sort of wavetable synthesis, but also how to sort of manipulate wavetables and that sort of playback. It's using something I chose to call phase shaping for making more like interesting sounds, or like kind of the thing it makes its complex timbres is via phase shaping, and we'll get into that later, what that actually means and how it works. Some of you might be thinking of like the Casio phase distortion or the Yamaha phase modulation, and everything is sort of in the same ballpark, but it's doing things a bit differently, which I think warrants the naming. So I've got this Sensal Morph right here, which is gonna probably be a bit finicky with the angles because I'm using a really bootleg camera setup, but I'm gonna try my best to keep it sort of in frame, just to give you an idea of what's going on with MP stuff. So Chiral is a synthesizer in Max for Live that supports the new MPE features in Live 11. So what that allows you to do is, like, for example, when I move up or down on this one, I can make that, affect the parameters of Chiral. So let's kind of minimize everything just to start off, and talk a little bit about like the sort of basis of the synthesizer. So we wanted to make something that was kind of, took some inspiration from history. Like, we were kind of inspired by, like, sort of the West Coast style of synths and some more like modular approaches to things. But kind of wanted to take this twist of, like, kind of in the vein of digital stuff, kind of keep it very futuristic, not necessarily behaving like anything specific, but sort of, taking inspiration from that era and culture and stuff like that, which I think is really interesting. Its whole idea of, like, what's a synthesizer, how do we play it, stuff like that, and kind of try and think about it, because like MP is sort of the new, if you think about like how Buchla came out with the music box, the easel, kind of early on, that was like one of the early performance synthesizers, that sort of introduced this way of playing with your fingers that was kind of, you know, not that common at the time. And now we sort of have another resurgence where we have this MPE standard that allows you to really go fine-grained. So it's really an interesting paradigm shift, or progression rather. So per default, it's kind of just a sine wave. You know, friendly sine wave. We all know it. We all love it. Well, most of us, I guess. And what you can do is, you know, the MP stuff, for example, just really quick, I can map pitch bend to pitch, which would be the most obvious one. And this is done in the matrix view. I'll go deeper into like the different views and stuff later, but like I can map that to pitch, and it will, as I drag my finger around the surface, it will like affect the pitch. But I can do that for every single finger. So you can sort of with your fingers sculpt where the sound is going and sort of redirect it into like this consonance almost that I was attempting, which is really cool. I am not much of a player myself, honestly. But digging into this with a morph and developing Chiral, I was have to say that I'm kind of a convert. Now I'm like, well, this is actually really, really cool, like having this control with your fingertips, and like you can do stuff like just like mapping things to pressure where you can now that I've mapped the bend parameter here with pressure, I get this up and down effect. I mean, the up and down motion, the pressure of my fingers will control that parameter, which gives me kind of, you know, instead of using an LFO, you can just use your fingers and kind of massage the sound into something, which it's just really cool. So the basis was sort of like, what would we do if we made an MP synth that would be, you know, for that kind of idea and, you know, make it kind of spacey and interesting. So the synthesis employed is called phase shaping, and all of that happens here in the, I wonder if my cursor is showing, great. All the phase shaping is happening here in the main oscilloscope, and this is, we really wanted something that was kind of more interesting than your run-of-the-mill oscilloscope. So this is sort of a Mobius strip-ish render of a waveform. And what that means is that we kind of take the oscillator shape and wrap that into like a circular sort of trajectory almost, which creates this interesting loop. And that's where the name comes from. Like a Mobius strip is a chiral shape, like a hand. When you flip it, it's not mirroring exactly. Which obviously is not the case with this sine wave, but as you start manipulating things, you start having these chiral shapes. And I saw someone asking how you pronounce the name of the synth, and it's chiral, unless that wasn't already obvious. But yeah, let's look at the different parameters. So we have sync, size, bend, fold, noise. Sync and size are tied together with a little thing there, and that's because they are sort of the same function. And what sync does, so all of these things here are the phase shaping parameters. So we kept them pretty tight. I wanted to, like, you know, to have the best stuff, the stuff that's most interesting. I had some other ideas, you know, but at the end of the day, often I find it's better to do the things that matter the most and make sure that they work really well. So that's sort of what we did. And so these all deal with the phase shaping, which we will get into later, how it works and how it's done. And sync is doing a sort of repetition of the waveform. And it's doing so in a kind of clever way. Let's just listen first. So it's kind of, introducing these formats to the sound in a sense. And what it's doing is it's repeating the same waveform over and over again. So if you think about the waveform as occupying like one unit of space, this is where it repeats, this is the length of it, but then you repeat the waveform inside of that length, and that creates these peaks that make the formats. So this is called oscillator sync. It's like something that exists in a lot of analog stuff and a lot of digital stuff. And it's basically just you're changing the repetitions of the waveform within the frequency it's playing, sort of. But what Chiral is doing is it's doing that within like a windowed. So it's called windowed sync. Some things call it smooth sync, but it's basically, if you wouldn't have this, it's basically applying a little envelope on the sound, and this is making the edges smooth. If we didn't have that, we would have sort of discontinuities which make the sound really sharp. But this just makes it kind of blend into things a lot more. And what's interesting about the way I kind of approach this is that you can change how many envelope repetitions there are as well. So you get a two-dimensionality to the sync. So if I push this to 10%, it's only applying the envelope. And then we can change the size, which will actually also have audible effects, because it's essentially sort of like AM. So yeah, we're getting these like sort of organ-like overtones, and that's just because of changing the dip of the waveform, so to speak, or explained in some way. And you can sort of find interesting combinations within those two parameters. So that gives you a lot to play around with in terms of like this kind of smoother area of sound, which also is useful for formants and stuff like that. So next we have bend, which is a function that makes the sort of face that we're shaping exponential, which kind of pushes the waveform forwards and compresses it. And it just makes it sharper, essentially. And we have wave folding, which is pretty straightforward. It folds the wave just like, kind of an analog synth does. And this is sort of two-stage wave folding. And it does so by first mirroring, as you see. We get like a tiny sine wave inside of the sine wave. And this is at the 50% mark. They're like equal length, so it's kind of mirrored onto itself. And this is for symmetry. So when we start folding again, we'll get like symmetrical dips, which just makes the sound a bit more harmonic. And at 50%, it's very square-ish. And as you start to combine these things, you get to really complex waveforms pretty quickly. And then we can also inject noise into the face, which just makes the waveform noisy, basically. But it does so at sort of the same interval as the oscillator itself, so it's kind of more musical noise. yeah, and that's kind of the basis of the oscillator. And you can kind of go quite far ways with just manipulating these kind of simple controls. And you know, this noise at very subtle levels, which is the sine wave, something simple as that. You know, just simple stuff that just kind of sounds lovely. That's sort of the yeah, that's sort of the basis of the oscillator. And then we have so this is all, you know, running in the same phase, which means that everything is sort of consistent with the oscillator. So it's like very stable stuff. So to kind of, you know, complement that stability, we introduced amplitude modulation as a function in the synthesizer. So this is sort of the AM section right here in the middle is sort of the thing that, you know, kind of introduces some motion into stuff. So for those who don't know, AM is, you know, kind of like tremolo or something like that, where you vary the volume. In this instance, it's an audio rate, which creates more timbres. So with the AM, you can introduce some interesting patterns of modulation. Let's listen a little bit to how that sounds. So yeah, suddenly there's like motion in the sound, and this will travel across notes and sort of have its own little life. And the frequency is directly related to sort of the timbre it gives you. So let's listen to what it does with a sine wave. So if we just have it at 0 and AM at like somewhere, it will kind of not do that much. It will drift the sound. It kind of adds an octave above, but as soon as we start moving that, we get like this secondary overtone. Which can be kind of inharmonic, making like bell tones and stuff like that. But you can also push it to something like 30, which is, I think, 2 above. Which makes kind of like a square wave-ish. And one interesting thing about the AM section is that it has feedback, which feeds the AM back into the AM modulator, which makes the modulation sharper, which is great for making timbres that are a little richer. So now we got something that is, you know, more akin to a kind of standard square wave, which is hard to do otherwise with the, well, you know, kind of hard to do with phase shaping, or rather it's not really the point. But as you start to playing around with all these things, you know, you find these. And you can also go like super low on the frequency, so you're essentially making a very obvious tremolo effect. And you know, this is something that I find really fun to map on the MPE stuff. So like something like AM frequency for the slide, I really, it's kind of, this one is a little sensitive, so let's see if we can do like. So now each finger is sort of the up and down of each finger is controlling the speed of the amplitude modulation. So. It's also really cool with pitch bend. If you have like something that is a little bit more dramatic. Do like one of these. So yeah, we have the AM section is there to, it's the motion thing, you know? Really makes it kind of alive and not so static as it would have been with just the phase shaping oscillator itself without any modules. Of course, you can introduce like a bunch of movement with like the mod matrix and, you know, using the LFO device in live and stuff of that. The controller I'm using is called Sensol Morph. It's using the Buchla Thunder overlay. It's really nice. One of the cheaper MPE devices out there. It's really cool. And then we have, after the AM, we have the sort of synth panel, which is, you know, the stuff like amp envelope and some modulator, tone control, and you know, general dynamics and stuff like that. So one thing that's kind of interesting is that there's no like, it's more in the vein of like West Coast stuff where you have this sort of like a low pass gate type of filter, and that's the tone. As you change that, the frequencies will be reduced, and the upper frequencies will be reduced, the harmonics rather, and the sound will be duller. But what's also neat about it is that it's kind of like a low pass gate where it reacts to the envelope. So if I you know, have a kind of more plucky envelope and tone at like a mid setting, I get these sort of classic plucks. Or, you know, attenuated timbres. And the idea behind this is kind of like, you know, it's sort of thinking about sound as this like physical object where, you know, in real life in air, when you have sound in air, you know, when you move away from something, it doesn't just change in amplitude, the sort of filter of it, or like the timbre changes as well. It becomes duller the further away you are. You know, you lose upper harmonic. So the tone filter is sort of to give this like sort of natural feel to things, where when you play the amplitude envelope, it doesn't just change amplitude. It's sort of, you know, the sound and the dynamics are kind of intertwined with that part of the sound, which makes this sort of, you know, a little bit more alive. Yeah, so tone can be used, you know, it can be used as a traditional filter too, if you modulate it with the slope, which we'll get into very soon. And it's just a very nice, clean, zero delay filter for anyone who's interested in the nitty gritty. So the slope is the sort of modular inspired modulator. It's a little bit surgy, if anyone wants a reference. It's this, here the standard is sort of like a triangle wave, and you can configure this, you can drag it around the angle of it, and it will sort of be, you know, as a decay or an attack, or, you know, perfectly symmetrical. And let's map that to something like tone, for example. So yeah, this is sort of very triangle-like. And if you hit this switch, as plus or minus, you can make it bipolar, which is much more like how sort of an LFO works. So essentially the slope is this like super configurable modulation source. So now with it, when it's like, it affects the tone 50% here. With the bipolar, it will go between minus 50 and 50. So when we have tone set to 50, the slope will essentially go from 0 to 100, like from this center, sort of, if that makes any sense. So if you think about the knob moving like this, that's what will happen. Simple stuff. And it can also be exponential. Which makes it sort of snappier. So if we listen to the linear, it's a little dull, but exponential, much more snappier. It's not super obvious on like the tone unless we max it out. Basically just, you know, better for sort of plucky stuff and percussion if you want to do that. Because one thing you can do with the LFO also, or the slope, is it has a few different modes. So one mode is free, which means it's like always running, like, you know, a standard LFO on a Eurorack system or whatever. Or you can have it triggered, which will mean that it resets, the like shape resets every time you trigger it. So it's always like, it's always giving the same rhythms, sort of, if you want to think about it like that, every time you hit a key. Or you can change it to 1, which is a one-shot mode, making it an envelope. Which in this case makes the tone much more behave like a standard filter. You know, or you can do stuff like apply it to the pitch. If you want to do something that's, you know, akin to a bass drum sooner or later, you know. So yeah, the slope is just there as this hyper configurable modulator, and it's, you know, kind of good for kind of everything, which is really cool. And, you know, the exponential mode can be bipolar as well, so you can kind of find these weird in-betweens and Also interesting playing around with slightly asymmetrical modulation instead of just the regular, you know, sine wave or triangle wave or whatever. So yeah, and that can be mapped to, you know, everything. It can be, you know, and doing minus on some stuff. A little too chaotic maybe, but anyway, you get the point. And on top of all of this stuff, we have something called dirt, which is a distortion thingy. And this is great for just, you know, I always like it when synths can kind of, you know, have some grit to it, and, you know, you can really make some like interesting textures with it. A lot of synths can kind of feel a bit clean, and that's kind of the point with this, because I think that's a good base point to have like a very clean sound, because then you can dirty it up. It's not so easy to go the other way around. Like if you have a dirty synth, it's kind of hard to make it clean. But if you have the option to make it dirty, you know, it's cool. So, and you know, one of the cooler things I think is just applying it to a sine wave and seeing what it sounds like, because it's pretty. It's kind of a tape saturation-ish effect, and it goes from subtle to harsh. And it affects all the voices, so depending on what you play, you will have like harmonics colliding, which is cool. So it's just another thing there to give it a lot of weight. And when everything comes into play, which, you know, we'll get into that in a little bit, it really makes a huge difference. And lastly, but not least, we have the space effect, which is this kind of crazy huge reverb, well, depending how you play with it. Just to kind of, you know, glue things together, you have this huge reverb called space. Let's just listen a little bit to. So yeah, the space effect is this like huge reverb, and the trail is sort of what, you know, that's how long it will sustain. Gravity is the size of the space, and right now it's only halfway there, and it's, you know. And you can go like super crazy with it. Yeah, it goes on for quite a while. It's pretty neat. I really like it. I think it's a very unorthodox reverb in terms of how it's made technically, but I think it sounds really good, and it's quite simple too, which is always cool. That sometimes the simple stuff sounds the best. And I personally I like stuff that kind of sounds very digital. So it's quite nice. And it has some interesting properties. So a lot of reverbs, to get into sort of technical details, a lot of reverbs have like both something called an all-pass filter and a delay. And the all-pass filter is this what makes like the frequencies kind of extend, and the delay then kind of space that out to make like this space. But this is all pass filters, so it kind of just smooths the sound out super much. But what happens when you like if you spread that out a lot without the trail, the feedback, you get kind of less like smooth. You don't get so much spacing, which kind of makes interesting effects. And it's especially noticeable in plucky sounds. I have to show this interesting. If you have like a very short pluck, you'll start hearing how the space effect works when it's maxed out without any trail applied feedback. Sure. So it's starting to sound kind of like, grains or something strange like that. And that's just an effect of how the reverb has this unorthodox structure. And if you push it down quite a lot, you get these kind of more standard-ish sounding stuff and very short reverbs, but using the trail, you sort of extend it, and the trail has this filter which makes everything kind of ring out into this. And the space, of course, interacts really well with the dirt parameter. So let's do it. And and within all this, there's like tricks like that. If you push it really low, I don't know, if you have headphones on, you will hear this. You can use the space as sort of just this stereo effect. So yeah, the distortion is acting on the whole signal path. So it's like the voices into the verb and then distortion. So it's like this, I really wanted it to play with the whole sound, because something like stuff I worked before on, which, like for example, the digitone. One thing I really love with that is when you use the master distortion and you have all these things going, it just kind of glues things together in this really interesting way, and you get this interplay between voices and effects and everything, and it's just really neat. Yeah, and yeah, all of this can do neat sounds. Like I think this is one of the sounds from the trailer. You can do like little interesting bells. Of course, great for pads and stuff like that. This one is a really a patch I really like. This is more playing with the reverb, which is a sine wave. Kind of interesting, just a sine wave through the reverb, and it kind of makes this whistle almost little gabber bass drum. Kind of double triggering from the morph a little bit, but you can do drum sounds on it, but it's a little trickier. It's not made for that, but I think still it's like kind of, you can do it. Kind of cool, funky percussion. I always like to make percussion with stuff that you're not really supposed to do. Yeah, of course, the Blade Runner, Yeah, always works. But yeah, it's really cool. This is not really the area I usually go for, so it's been really cool to work on this, and really fun to see the type of sounds. See, this is, I think, more gnarly. So yeah, all of these motions are coming from modulation in the modulation matrix, and the matrix is really something where you can just route kind of all of these things in the oscillator. Some of the AM stuff you can route from the slope and all the MP stuff and stuff like that to it, and you have the oscillator and the voice page, and you just click on this button to reach the different ones. And from here, you have your sources here: slope, envelope, velocity, pitch, bend, slide, and pressure. And the three last ones are the MPE things. So pitch, bend, slide, and pressure will be per finger, so to speak, and they can be routed to all these different things. And you know, by building these complexities, you can really make interesting, expressive sounds. Let's see what this is. Some kind of space banjo. I should have some cute, like Buchla-esque. Yeah, this is kind of. Buchla bongos. You gotta do it. Okay, well, you know, pretty cool. Oh, one more feature that's, let's see if this shows up on stream properly. No, okay, I gotta add that window. That's annoying, but okay. So when you press the little button above the, I'm just gonna slide this down. So when you press the little triangle here above the waveform, you get this screen, which lets you actually export this waveform as a single cycle wave file, which you can use in like, you know, your favorite tracker or Digitact or Rhythm or whatever, which is just, you know, a cool feature that I could do, so I did it. Cool thing for the more technical out there. Anyway, kind of a neat little thing. How do I get this out of here? Okay. So yeah, cool little thing. Which personally I love single cycle waveforms. Yeah, Octatrack, you know, they're all really nice for that stuff. Let's see. Yeah, and you know, this comes with, you know, a modest selection of presets that kind of just show up some of the features. I think this is supposed to be a bass sound. And, you know, this is something we will kind of update to our older, our other synths as well. Just hasn't like been something so straightforward with presets. It's a little tricky with Max for Live stuff, but, you know, they're there. So let's talk about what phase shaping is. And to do that, I made a little max patch to show you guys. It's here. And this is, so this is where we get to the more technical bit of the stream, which I hope illuminates what this is. Because, you know, I saw a lot of people talking about what is phase shaping. Is it like the phase modulation on, you know, Yamaha, or is it phase distortion like Casio stuff, or, you know, and the answer is sure. Everything is kind of interchangeable in a way, but, you know, it's about finding the apt term for what it does. And it is kind of its own thing, and I'll show why. So right now what we're looking at is sort of the basis of how a wavetable oscillator functions. Maybe I should get rid of Ableton a little bit to make it a little less visually annoying. So this is sort of the basis of wavetable synthesis. So we have something called a phaser, and that generates this linear trajectory, this linear, this line. It's called a phaser, and it goes from 0 to 1. And it does this, you know, cyclically as an oscillator. And what that does is it's sent into the wavetable oscillator, and the wavetable oscillator has a certain shape that's usually contained in a waveform called a wavetable, a table of data, in this case a sine wave, and the phaser reads the sine wave data. So if you think about it like sort of, you know, If you think about the straight line is sort of following the shape exactly as it is given to you. You go from 0 to 1. At 0, you have the point here. At 1, you have the point here, and in between are all the other values. So if you go in the straight line, it will just draw a sine wave. But when you start distorting that straight line, the sine wave is read in different ways. So if we, for example, make the line exponential, we'll get the bend functionality. And so this compresses the waveform further forward. And you can kind of, it's a little abstract, but if you think about it like where all the data is, like here is sort of the bulk of the sine wave, and that's where we see it end up. And so essentially we're just reading it at a different position. And this can be mapped, you can do it the other way around, mess around like that. But you can also do stuff like if we make a triangle thing, if we do this, we have a breakpoint in the middle, it will just, read it like a tiny version of it, or hard to explain, but kind of like, pulse width. This is how you would do pulse width modulation on a wavetable synth. If you had like a square wave, you would change the width of it like this. And essentially you're just making the read much shorter, but within the same like window, the same frequency oscillation. And you could do funky stuff like, add a middle point and make both points exponential, which would make this kind of cool center wave. Oh, I think I can also, oh, that was really clicky and weird. Anyway, it makes this kind of sharper-ish sine. And essentially how I'm doing this in Max, for those who are curious, it's reading like this buffer that is generated here and into like a cycle that is being read. And I mean, this is sort of the basis of phase distortion too. And, you could even say that it's like how phase modulation works too. In phase modulation, or, FM as Yamaha calls it, you would input a sine wave and you'd get like, something out of the sine wave in the end as well. And you can mess around with this endlessly. If we do something like this, we will start to have wave shaping, or wave folding, sorry. And you can introduce a dip here, make something like really crazy. And yeah, so this is what Chiral does. It introduces these different algorithms of shaping the waveform, the sine wave. So everything is sort of just one of these things that reads a sine wave in interesting ways. And there are a few synths out there that do this. It's no like, most wavetable synths have something like this built in. Like Serum, the Ableton Wavetable. But, it's just a kind of an interesting way to introduce harmonics into something that is otherwise quite static. Yeah, and again, it's a little buzzy for some reason, but, you get the idea. Just a sine wave, and as we change, it's narrower. And you can also do like crazy things, like kind of, let's see if we do this, we round off the edges even more. Other way around. We kind of get like a square wave. So you can really do quite a lot by just shaping the face of the waveform. And, there's lots more to do in this. But Chiral kind of takes what I think is, the sort of things that make the most sense. Because a lot of these ways of shaping gets quite abstract quite fast, and in some ways it's maybe better to have functions like the AM to sort of introduce liveliness instead of just, But you can really mess around and do like really crazy waves. So that's how it works under the hood. And now is a great time for if anyone has any questions. So I'll just give a second. So yeah, the distortion in Chiral is based, or well, it's this open source distortion algorithm called sigmoid distortion. And you can find it in the SDK wave shaping library on the Cycling74 website. It's like the only part kind of the synth I haven't written myself. So yeah, but it's in there. It's appropriately licensed. The object name for this, for what? It's so I'm using just a phaser. I'll open up the gen patch. I don't know if this will say much though. But yeah, the distortion is this sigmoid distortion. It's kind of from an old repo with quite nice wave shapers. It's kind of basic wave shaping, but yeah, it sounds good, I think, and I tweaked it a little bit to my liking. Yeah, this is the basically we have the phaser going into the Wavetable Oscillator, which is actually doing the real, which is doing the distortion here, and then into a Wavetable Oscillator with a sine wave lookup table, as it's called. And the object I'm drawing in is simply called function. It's this breakpoint editor in Max where you can make your own little shapes and stuff, and that's then fed into a buffer called phaser here by using the peak object every time it's redrawn. So yeah, it's kind of a simple setup. And then a gen patcher, yeah, it's playing that back. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to do some updates to Superberry and Doublet. That's going to also include presets and package it in the same way as Chiral, just to make it a bit more user-friendly. I don't know when that will be available exactly. Depends on how much time I have for everything, but you know, it would be nice to do it as soon as possible. I have some tweaks to do to Doublet to optimize it in terms of CPU, so that will be cool. Same for Superberry probably, which will be nice. But we'll see when that is available. Let's look at Ableton again. So peak is a max object which lets you write to a buffer. It's P-E-E-K, and it lets you write data to a buffer basically. It's quite neat. Yeah, what else should we do? Open up the device? Probably. That would be cool. I try to keep Chiral very neatly made. To, you know, allow people to kind of learn from it and reuse some parts of it, if, you know, inclined. I mean, of course, it's not like commented, but it's, you know, it's pretty neat and tidy. Chiral is actually not band limited because it's dealing with sine waves. So typically there's not that much issue with aliasing. It can get a bit gnarly when you use all of the functions together, but in general, it's quite well behaved. And if you run it at 96 kilohertz in Ableton, it sounds pretty pristine in whatever you do. So, yeah. There is a similar walkthrough video for Superbarian Doublet as well. I haven't uploaded that to YouTube, but we're gonna do that tomorrow when this is done streaming. But yeah, so yeah, here we have the thing, and we open it up, and we have Chiral. So it's all centered around this this gen patch, basically. And I'm using the MC object, multi-channel, to do polyphony and MPE, which it's very well suited for. And then in this section is the effects. So it's very little MSP and very much gen. And over here we have some of the kind of the UI stuff, and all of these knobs and stuff. These are just the default Ableton knobs, but they're rewritten. The rendering is a custom JavaScript mgraphics thing, which you can do. It's called a JS painter file, and it just allows you to do different graphic scripts for any object, and it's really neat. I really recommend giving it a go, because it really allows you to do something that's a bit more custom, and like things like the envelope, those are all just JavaScript objects using JSUI that I made myself to kind of make, you know, a bit more interesting interfaces. And one cool thing is the scope, the oscilloscope. This is another JavaScript thingy that actually uses the same gen patch as the main synth part, but it's running it in control rate, so it's not like computing per sample, but it's just doing like instructions. So every time I move a knob, it updates the waveform, which is like reading this buffer that is being written to. And that's also how the exporting function works. So it's kind of this, it was kind of like, I was like, well, what if I, you know, do an oscilloscope by just writing to a buffer? It will be like less CPU and just allow me to do kind of more involved graphics, you know, such as this one, which is very specific. And then I was like, hey, I could actually, you know, export waveforms from this. And I felt like, yeah, why not do it? So that's how that was done. And it's a very simple JavaScript. I'll show that as well. I'm just gonna add the window in OBS. Boom. It's quite simple. It's just like taking the buffer, because you can access buffers with JavaScript in Max using peak here. It's a function inside of the JavaScript in Max, and I just read the buffer and map it to two sine waves, and it kind of just makes an oscilloscope. And you know, my math skills are kind of limited, so it's not that hard. I can really recommend to get into this, because it's a lot of fun and it really makes things shine when you do stuff like this that are kind of unique. The JS Painter tutorials, well, what the, delete that. There aren't that many JS Painter or mgraphics tutorial. I just kind of dug around on the cycling forums and also read the JS Painter documentation and kind of just brute forced my way into rewriting the live objects. You know, I should do a write-up on it, because it's maybe not that common that people do that, but I think it's a really neat function that should be visible more. Yeah. And yeah, read the README. yeah. I mean, it's the documentation is sparse, but it's it's very basic drawing algorithms. So you kind of just have to wing it, honestly, which is kind of fun. Let's look at the gen patch. Speaking of things that are fun but not winging it. So gen, for those who don't know, is max MSP's per sample DSP framework, you could say, which allows you to, per each sample in your program, do sort of a function which allows you to write algorithms that are very deep, like filters and stuff like that. And that's what I use for everything that makes a sound in all of our stuff. And the gen patch is actually simpler than you might think. And all of the actual synth is this here. So this is the entire synth. So it's pretty clever. I was gonna say simple, but I'll give myself some credit. This is the master phaser. This is where it happens. Which is telling it how fast to oscillate, and that goes into all these functions. Like we have fold. I'll open that up. I just gotta create another window in OBS. This is always a little tedious. So we have another window here. This is essentially taking the phase here in one, and it's doing this other thing, the mirroring I was showing before. And then it's doing simple simple folding with the fold function, which is this built-in thing that kind of just makes, it takes you have you have bounds for the for the input values, and those are then mapped. So when I go above 1, it kind of wraps back to 0, or rather folds back to 0. So it kind of goes back again, and then hard to explain, but folds back and folds back and folds back the more iterations you do, which when you map it to this phaser, it makes wavefolding, and these clip objects are just to scale the parameters. So when you go over a certain value, it starts introducing the second stage, and so it's just kind of mapping a behavior to the knob. And I do that a lot in all the patches where they just have intricate behaviors. And same with the bending. It's this thing that just kind of multiplies the value with itself, which makes it exponential. And that makes the bend thing that we saw before from the shaper. Here we also have another. So all of these cycle objects are sine wave lookups, or I think they're cosines actually, cosine lookups. That's why I have the +75 to make it a sine wave. It's a phase offset. All of them are manipulated by this phaser and its functions. And the second cycle is doing, for example, things like the windowing function, stuff like that. And it all just kind of comes together to this kind of intricate wiring, all stemming from the same single phaser, which also makes it very light on CPU, which was one of the goals for making this. Because I was in my mind when making something for MPE, I was well, it would be cool if you can have just a lot of voices to play with, because it's a performance instrument. So it uses about as much DSP as Ableton Wavetable or something like that, which is still not super light, but it's light enough for most people. And here's the AM oscillator, which is just a simple little thing. And where the bulk of the patch is actually all the modulation routing, which is all these crazy things that are just taking each parameter and applying the modulation. So it's just this insane matrix of inputs and different modulation routings. Yeah, that's kind of the gen patch. It's quite simple. And the filter is this zero delay filter that's optimized from a reactor patch. And actually, one thing that's not super clear when you look at it is that the sort of so when I play a lot of these modulations, you kind of easily lose the fundamental frequency, meaning like you kind of lose bass or kind of the girth of the sound. So there's this, if we follow right here, this cycle object, this sine wave oscillator, is actually mixed into the final output with half the amplitude as the main one to kind of just give it some, oomph, which really helps. It doesn't make it so tinny. It just makes it kind of blend into the basis of the sound and makes the fundamental really strong, so that it's like musically coherent in a way. Yeah. Oh, and another nice thing, for example, this cycle thing here is so this one here, the SAH1 is like a sample and hold. So every time, what this is actually doing is, so when you change the like window amount of the sync functionality, when you change the window size, you would get like a lot of clicking if you change it all the time. So what this does is that you can only change it. It only changes on like a zero crossing of the waveform. So every time the waveform is 0, it can change the window, which makes it kind of a smooth operation. Just one of those little details that I think really makes stuff. I want things to feel good when you use them. It shouldn't like do any annoying clicking or stuff like that. It should feel good. Yeah. The AM comes in here, kind of affects most parts of the patch. And it's just multiplying the amplitude, and it's bipolar, which kind of makes it more ring modulation, but I also think ring modulation comes with a connotation of sounding analog, which I didn't really want. So that's the basis of the patch. It's, yeah, that's kind of it. It's devilishly simple. Is there a force drum voice? No, no. There's been some work on one, but we'll see where it ends up. I do love drum synthesis. Yeah, let's just put it at that. Yeah. Yeah. What should we do now? Anyone have any more questions, or should I play some sounds, or dig more into other aspects of the patch? What do you all want to see? Let me know and I'll do it. I'm here for you. How can one get better in Gen? I'm not exactly a programmer. I do program. Well, that's kind of direct. Well, I'm not a programmer. I'm kind of a programmer not by choice, more by kind of by necessity. But for me, Jen, I think I just started building stuff and kind of looking a lot at like the forums and seeing how people do stuff and just building my own ideas from seeing how stuff works. I would recommend looking through the built-in examples as well as like some of the, I think you should, set a goal for yourself. Say like, hey, I want to build this thing, and then you can like search on the internet for like, say you want to build like an FM synth in Gen. You just Google FM synth max MSP Gen, and I'm sure something will pop up, and you can kind of read about that and pull some stuff from that. And I think that helps getting a sense of how it works. It is a little bit trickier because everything is per sample, but once you sort of understand the flow of that, it gets a lot easier and quite addictive, I think, because it's very possible to make things that are extremely like tight and it can really be super specific on what you want it to do, which I think is for me, kind of a necessity in making these things, because like I couldn't really make this stuff. I guess I could make some of this stuff in MSP, but I'm too anal about how things work or how I want them to, Can you build a live matrix patch? Yeah, we can do that. Definitely, let's do that. I have a Daisy patch, and I'm actually going to try and run a voice of Chiral on it. I think it's totally doable. So that's going to be fun to see how that fares. Shouldn't be a problem, actually. Can you please send me the max patch? Yeah, no problem. I should have a Dropbox link, actually. It has some weird. The numbers don't line up right. So it will sound kind of bad, but it will just give you an idea of the basics of it. I just did it without listening to it, which was my mistake. But anyway, there it is. Go ahead. Yeah, I haven't tried any other MP stuff with Chiral, but I have friends and users who reported that it works well with the Seaboard and the push, which does aftertouch per note, stuff like that. Yeah, so it works. Always good that it works. Let's get out of that mode. I don't want to save that. Let's make a patch. I have to, so reset everything. But yeah, it's been really fun making this. I'm really happy with the results. For every device, we try and up the quality a little bit, and I think this was a very big leap. Not to talk down on our other stuff, which I think is also good, but this sort of, it's always a learning process, which I think is so cool about the Mac stuff and the community is, I think there are a lot of really good Max instruments coming out, and that really inspires me to push things as well. And I was like, well, let's really try and make something that looks good, sounds good, works good, and also doesn't use much CPU, is packaged well, the whole package. So I'm really happy with how everything came out. A little clicky, that's like a weird thing in Macs for some reason. There we go. Okay, okay, let's try and. I always like applying a little AM. Yeah, that's nice. A little feedback. A little noise. No, let's do it later. A little bend. Okay, cool. Let's do matrix. So, Let's do some voice stuff. That's always fun. Or no, oscillator, I mean. Little bend on the slide, little noise on the pressure. I think the pitch blend is always cool on the amplitude frequency. And then I really like doing slope on amplitude modulation. Just going off. Tone. Nice. A little dirt, maybe. Space, gravity, trail. Kind of want to map tone to pressure as well. Let's map it. Let's map it. Little bit of pitch maybe from pitch bend. Should be like a little nice. Get some movement there. Maybe a little faster slope. Stop me if I'm not making sense. What was I doing? Oh yeah, okay. More amplitude frequency. So yeah, pretty quick to work with, I think. Let's do some. I always like to make drum sounds because it's hard. So like then you would kind of use the slope in this more specific way. I think that would be cool to take a look at. Let's do like a very, there we go. So we want the slope to be quick. This is probably too quick. Exponential and one shot. So that makes it snappy. It will only trigger once, and it's a envelope. More like. That's pretty fat. And if we go to like 30% on the frequency, or 30 rather. Ooh. Unexpected. Yeah, let's okay. Let's add let's a little less tone because I wanna modulate the tone with the slope. But I want the same amplitude, so it's a little too slow. That's fast, I mean. And then a little pitch modulation. Dirt. nice thing you can do with the slope is to add some modulation to the amp, which makes it even more snappier. And then, you know, one nice thing to add is a little bit of noise. Let's just sequence this, I guess. Yeah, and then there was like a little kind of a snare drum-ish sound, kind of. Let's solo this. Did I just what? Whoa. All right, let's just do some live, because I feel like it. Let's do some live music making. That was really fun with the machine drum stream for those who caught that. So this patch is kind of introducing the noise in the specific way with the slope. So the noise is sort of mixed out of the equation first, so it like gives it a punch. That's cool. Hilarious. Okay, let's maybe not. Yeah, I don't know. Always fun to do some weird little stuff. Someone was, I think Mark was saying, let's do some cool little roulette stuff. So roulette is our sequencer that comes with Superberry or the Trio. It's a cute little sequencer, which is great for making all kinds of melodies and stuff. And you can just push that into like, oh, let's do Phrygian and like A and like this, transpositions. Maybe too cute, I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Let's not go further into that. But fun. That turned out pretty good. Like okay-ish. Always risky. Try and make something live, but it's fun. But yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's. I really enjoy using it. I think it's like a really interesting piece of software that I think is a bit rare digitally, because it's like so much more like. I'm like always inspired. Like, I'm so much more inspired by like the idea of the instrument, you know, and a lot of that is like this kind of focused object, focused device, which has like a more limited set of parameters, and is like more like specific rather than like the typical software that is like kind of more, you know, this can do everything, which is, you know, that's cool also. But personally, stuff like this more resonates with me and what I want to make, and same goes for Felicia and Force in general. What we want to do is stuff like this that is, you know, specific and hits a sort of, you know, a specific note. So yeah, this is, yeah. Yeah, let's see, how long have we been going? About almost 2 hours. So yeah, this is a great time again for any questions or requests or, you know, about anything. Yeah, so just shoot if you have any, if you wonder what's, yeah, whatever. How do I approach building patterns and music? It depends. I mean, sometimes, or like a lot of the times, I'm just kind of playing something. And then, you know, it kind of tickles. You know, I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. I kind of want to go into, I'm like, oh, I can go down this angle or whatever and just explore that a little bit. Let kind of my intuition guide me. Sometimes a little bit more deliberate, where I'm like, oh, I want to make like this type of track then I try making it, and then I'm a little bit systematic. I'm like, oh, I want to start with drums or whatever. I guess for this one I was like, well, let's try and explore this sound, and I think like, oh, it would be nice with something, you know, like a lead or, and I'm just gonna add stuff. Usually just do a loop and then think about where to take it. If that helps answering. I don't know, I think a lot of intuition for me, honestly, just like kind of letting whatever I'm doing guide me in a sense. Like, you know, seeing it as an exploration. Start at one point and then kind of just like, oh, this is interesting, and go down that path. I don't really so often come into it with like an idea. Yeah, this whole video is gonna be on Twitch, and we'll upload it to YouTube maybe right after this is finished, actually, or tomorrow morning or something like that. The other stream we did about a month ago maybe or more is already uploaded and will be made public when this is done too, so you can watch both back. Well, hardware is kind of, it's tricky. It's a lot of cost. There's a lot of, it's a little harder than making a Max for Live device. We would need a mechanical engineer, a real programmer, stuff like that. But, you know, I think certainly it's something we would like to do, hardware. And down the line, I don't think it's impossible, but there's gonna have to be a lot of planning, and we're gonna have to find a good way to do it that isn't like a huge upfront cost, because we're not exactly rich. But there is definitely a desire to make hardware from us. But it is tricky. As for hardware versions of the same things, that's typically something I don't like to do. I like to make things that are a bit more specific to, you know, the thing that it is, so to speak. Or like, you know, I could definitely see something like Chiral in a hardware version, but it would probably be a little different to kind of make more sense in hardware, or, you know. kind of make it kind of make it make sense sort of for what it is, you know, as this or that many knobs, and so it wouldn't be exactly the same thing. But you know, something like the bokeh delay in Eurorack, I think would be pretty cool. Still, that could be like ported, honestly. Although I'm not sure how how I would do that on like a Daisy. I think it's a little too, yeah, too limited maybe, but could try. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. It's been nice showing off the new little thing. I'm quite proud, but you know, now it's time to figure out how we can raise the bar. So onwards, and how do you say? Yeah. Up and onwards? No, I don't know. Whatever. Excited to do more stuff, and excited to see what people make with this. And so far the reception has been amazing. We're super happy to see that people love it, and that it hits some sort of, strikes a chord, you know. Inspires us to keep going, keep making things that we think should exist and that people are inspired by. So yeah, thanks to everyone for checking in, and for those who missed the most of the stream, we'll upload this to YouTube tomorrow or right after this, and also the other stream, as I mentioned before, that we did about a month ago or whatever, is also going to be uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch back and get all the tricks and stuff from our gear. So yeah, have a nice Sunday night or day or evening or whatever. yeah, we have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/forcefm. Simple as that. Yeah, I'll see you in the next whatevers. Ciao.